Is that it? That's exactly how Sir Geoff Hurst reacted when he won the World Cup with England in 1966. In this video, I'm going to discuss the main themes in his book, Last Boy of 66, and give you my honest thoughts on the book. Let's get into the review, shall we? Throughout the book, Hurst gives quite a few snappy memories of how England won the World Cup, and the first is very much a sense of disillusionment. Hurst said that nothing really changed, and you wonder really what he expected to be different. Keep in mind that Hurst only had 5 caps before the World Cup started, the first of which was only 5 months before the tournament. Hurst's sense of "is that it" was so much so that the day after the World Cup final, all he did was mow the lawn. He said that just because of their victory, life went on and chores still needed doing. I mean, goodness me, what else did he do in these riotous celebrations? Wash the dishes, clean his car? I mean, goodness me, Sir Geoff, calm down. But to be honest, that sense of humility for Hurst was actually well placed, because the FA really didn't exactly lavish the team with praise after such an achievement. In fact, at first, the FA wanted to give each member of the squad bonuses based on minutes played. That was until Bobby Moore, the captain, said no, everyone should be paid the same amount. Eventually, the FA paid each member of the squad £1,000, which was later reduced to £600 because of tax. Furthermore, Sir Geoff discusses how Jack Charlton, one of the World Cup winners with England, applied for the England job in the 1970s, but actually never heard back from the FA. So it just shows the lack of respect and lack of acknowledgement which was felt throughout the World Cup winning team. I just felt the FA was so tone deaf really, and maybe they felt that after that success in 66, England would just kick on and just start winning everything. Evidently, as we now know, it didn't work out like that. But one thing I have to admit is that I just wish there was more coverage of Sir Alf Ramsey in this book. I loved reading about his disciplinarian and ruthless approach to management, and honestly, I just learned so much about him, and learning new things is one of the reasons why I really love sports books. For instance, I didn't know that straight after he managed to get Ipswich into the First Division, he won that title in 1961-1962. So for a promoted team to actually win the league at the first time of asking, that would be like Ipswich winning the Premier League in 24-25, which, based on their showing, wouldn't really be that likely, to be honest. So at the time though, domestic football in England was a much more level playing field. So for instance, in that same season that England won the league, Manchester United finished right down near the bottom of the table, and furthermore, massive teams like Liverpool and Stoke City were actually still in the old second division, which is the second tier. Furthermore, I also didn't know that Sir Alf Ramsey actually played for England in their historic upset defeats in the 1950s to Hungary and USA, it's called soccer! Sir Geoff Hurst also told of how Sir Alf Ramsey would not suffer fools gladly, and he mainly picked players based on their integrity, work ethic, their personality, and how they fit in with a certain system, rather than any sort of specific footballing ability. And after every England meet-up, no matter who you were or whatever your status in the squad, Sir Alf Ramsey would walk up to you and say, "See you again, if selected." I love that attitude from Sir Alf Ramsey, and I would have loved to have read a little bit more about how 66 impacted him, and also a bit more on some of his managerial methods. He's definitely one of the most interesting points in this book, for sure. And throughout Last Boy of 66, Geoff Hurst does come across as someone who really values family, and in one of the most emotive passages in his writing, he tells of how his brother, Rob, very sadly died by suicide after jumping in front of a train. For Geoff Hurst, carrying that grief must have weighed so heavy on him. There's also one scene in the book where Geoff Hurst is actually sitting on a train and the conductor walks up to him and says, "I was working the day your brother died." It was very much a sliding doors moment for the train conductor, so imagine if he had been away from work for whatever reason, just through random chance he became involved in such a tragic event. On the topic of death and aging, Geoff Hurst does cover how he had a heart attack at the age of 82, so I believe that would have been perhaps around 2023, 2024. Thankfully for Geoff, he recovered pretty well within a couple of weeks, and he was then back on stage doing his public speaking duties. Dementia is also covered in the book, as Sir Geoff talks about how the likes of Jack Charlton and Nobby Stiles, who both played in the final, both suffered from dementia. In fact, internet searches suggest that 6 of the starting 11 for England for the World Cup final suffered from dementia or Alzheimer's before they died. We now know this is, of course, such a massive issue for footballers, and if you're at all interested, Alan Shearer made a documentary about dementia for which he actually interviewed Nobby Stiles' son. That was back in 2017, so it's still out there if you want to watch it. The content about dementia in this book was so enlightening and illuminative, but I just felt it was very much tacked on to the end. It was just a little bit jarring how it just felt like it was shoved on the end. I would have liked it to have been weaved in through the stories a little bit more, simply because it was just such a big issue. And on that note, I did find the book a little bit underwhelming. I think it was just because it's essentially a series of scattered monologues which don't really link in that well, and because of that, I don't feel like Sir Geoff Hurst can really cover any one topic in very much detail. There were also certain parts of the book which I just wasn't that interested in, i.e. where Sir Geoff Hurst talks about meeting with the 1966 squad for golf days. He also talks about what the wives and girlfriends did during the World Cup. I just wasn't really that fussed about this kind of information. I guess if I wanted to read about wives and girlfriends of footballers, I'd probably just read OK or Hello, I guess. So I just think the phrase, "Is that it?" just sums up my feelings on this book. I felt a little bit deflated by it. Be that as it may, there are still some interesting stories in the book if you do stick with it. So that brings us to the end of my review, and as this channel grows, I'm going to start posting some more of my reviews on the screen, so you can watch those as well. So thank you so much, as always, for watching, and see you again soon.